It's often said that a society should be judged by the way it treats its most vulnerable people. But 4 young Australians who are just that show that in Australia we could be doing a lot better. Each of them has complex and profound disabilities, and each is stuck in prison rather than in a facility that could handle their needs. How is that possible? Louise Milligan explains.
This is Melbourne Assessment Prison. On remand behind these walls are some of Victoria's most hardened criminals. But among them is a young man who isn't supposed to be here. He has a profound intellectual disability and autism. His name is Francis, and he has nowhere else to go.
Francis is turning 20 this week.
Yeah.
But what have the specialists told you is his mental age?
Around 2.5.
So he's basically a toddler running around in a grown man's body.
Yeah.
It is an abject failure that we have someone like him in custody. It's not a therapeutic environment for him. It's a custodial environment, it's punitive.
Francis has been in prison since September. He spent the first week in 23-hour-a-day solitary confinement and is now required to wear handcuffs every time he leaves his cell.
When I visited him in prison, when he came into the visitors box, his shirt appeared to be covered in blood stains and his fingers appeared to be bloody.
So he had been self-harming?
That's my understanding, yes. And it was particularly distressing 5 days later when I appeared in court on behalf of Francis, and Francis appeared via video link and he was wearing the same T-shirt. And then the next day when I had a further video conference with him, so 6 days after that initial visit, he remained in that bloody T-shirt.
Francis first came to 730's attention more than a year ago, when a whistleblower teacher told us his school decided he was too difficult to manage and left him out in the cold on a beanbag for an entire winter school term. His mother had no idea what was happening.
I was just so shocked. What could you do that's so wrong that you would be put outside like that?
As a result of the story, the Victorian government launched an investigation into the Merriang Special Developmental School, which Francis attended.
You'd kind of hoped that things would improve for Francis.
Yeah.
But did they improve?
No. It just spiralled out of control. His life just went worse downhill.
So this is Francis's latest NDIS package.
Right.
Francis's needs are so great, the National Disability Insurance Scheme has funded him for a package of $1.5 million. Because Francis requires specialist 24/7 care, he can't live with his mum Janet. Under the NDIS, Francis was allocated this public housing unit and a care provider, but that provider was sacked after there were concerns Francis was being abused by his carers.
I've been shown photographs of Francis where his whole body's covered in bruises, which was very disturbing to see.
New carers were installed, but Francis's legal aid lawyer, Lucy Geddes, was distressed by what she found when she visited the unit.
I was shocked at the conditions in which he was living, which could be described as squalid. There was no furniture in the house, there was only a single mattress on the floor. There were stains all over the walls, and I thought it was appalling that someone could be living in a house like that.
She says Francis was being kept effectively as a prisoner.
The carers, for whatever reason, didn't think that it was appropriate for Francis to be outside, and so for days on end had been kept inside like a caged animal.
Francis eventually snapped. He broke down the door to the unit and absconded. He assaulted a bystander. The police picked him up and he's been on indefinite remand ever since, because every time there is a bail application, there's no one there to take him home, because his complex needs means he can't live without comprehensive professional help. Legal Aid Victoria says Francis is one of 4 clients in prison because under the NDIS there is no one willing to care for them.
So the theory of the NDIS is that we give funds to a person, they go out to the marketplace, they can choose the service provider that best meets their needs. But if there's not a service provider who wants to provide that service, there's no market, then that person's funds are really of no use to them.
The National Disability Insurance Scheme was supposed to be the great white hope for people with disabilities and their families. Has it been for you?
No. No.
Legal Aid made a submission yesterday about Francis's case to the Federal Parliamentary Committee on the NDIS.
He's not coping well in jail. He finds the environment very distressing and frightening. A person in his situation would not usually be in custody as a result of the criminal justice circumstances. Ordinarily, a person in his situation would be charged and then bailed. The offences aren't serious enough to attract a custodial sentence on conviction.
In the past, Victoria's Department of Health and Human Services would have been responsible for Francis, but that's now changed.
The NDIA has described its role as only to provide funds. It's a bank. So no one seems to be responsible to ensure that those services are there for him.
How does it make you feel as a mum that no one will have your son?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. He just doesn't understand why he's there. He's going to emotionally go downhill.
This is a tragedy. It shouldn't happen, but it is happening regrettably, and something has to be done to deal with it.
Federal Government MP Kevin Andrews is chairing the committee.
For many of these people with complex mental and intellectual problems, it's not just an issue for the Commonwealth and the NDIA, it's also an issue for state services as well. And they have to come together, I believe, as a matter of urgency, and in each state fund a provider of last resort so we don't have people languishing in jail for months, and in one case here in Victoria, for nearly 2 years now, who should not be in jail.
Francis had his 20th birthday yesterday. His mum wasn't allowed to bring him a birthday present, so she put together a socks and jocks care package. And off she went to visit her boy in jail. The federal agency which manages the NDIS said in a statement that these sorts of situations are complex. But when 7:30 informed Victorian Disability Minister Martin Foley about Francis, he immediately personally intervened and told me this afternoon he'd instructed his department to find a care provider to get Francis out of jail.
Today we've secured a accredited quality provider who will start tomorrow the process of engaging with Francis and starting to get him out of the remand prison.
But the point is, Minister, that there are lots of Francises now and there will be in the future.
Sadly, I suspect you're very correct in that. For Francis and anyone else that's falling through the gaps that have been created as the National Disability Insurance Scheme rolls out, we have to do better. The Productivity Commission only last month called for that very thing, that the Commonwealth needs to step up through the National Disability Insurance Scheme and be the provider of last resort. That's self-evidently the case, and there is no better example than what has happened to Francis.
I don't want anyone to go through what we've been through.